if you grew up watching only mainstream media and CNN and MSNBC and you only saw what was being portrayed in the what I believe is the left-wing liberal media, you're not going to believe conservatives have a good point of view. On the other hand, if you grew up only watching Fox News, then you're only going to be exposed to those points of views, and you're only going to believe that the conservatives are right. It's this us versus them mentality. We want to cut through that on this podcast. We want to present the truth. We want to find the truth by having good discussion and honest debate. Our country is so heavily divided right now. You either love what's going on or you absolutely hate what's going on. And the wedge, of course, is what's happening in Doge. It's one of the big you're either pro-Doge and government efficiency, and you love what's happening, the size of government's being cut, or you can't stand it. And you can't. I'm gonna see if I can. Yeah, I can hear myself, but I'm gonna keep these off. Or you can't stand what's going on, and you're freaked out, and you're wondering: are we losing our democracy? Are we gonna lose our freedom? Is the country gonna end up in turmoil? And this is such a hot button issue, and we're a local podcast, a local program. But I wanted to tackle it because I think it really comes down to one basic thing that I believe everybody should understand, which is economic literacy and understanding the national debt and understanding what does the debt mean? How does it affect your life? How does it affect the value of our currency? What does it mean to say that we are $38 trillion in debt and we run on average every year a $4 trillion deficit? What does that stuff mean? I think I didn't understand that when I was a young person. I didn't understand the difference between fiscal policy and monetary policy. Those are two words that just kind of sound complicated, but a lot of people don't understand the difference. I want to get into that. And I want to get into, what is it that Doge is doing and why people are so hyperbolic about it. And of course, I'm going to be biased. I want this to be a nonpartisan show, but of course I am biased. Everybody's biased. Everybody sees the world through their own lens, and that lens is obviously skewed by the sources of input that you expose yourself to. If you grew up watching only mainstream media and CNN and MSNBC and you only saw what was being portrayed in the what I believe is the left-wing liberal media, you're not going to believe conservatives have a good point of view. You're just simply not going to believe it because you never heard those points of view and you never were exposed to them. On the other hand, if you grew up only watching Fox News, then you're only going to be exposed to those points of views, and you're only going to believe that the conservatives are right and the left wing is full of stupid idiots. And so it's this us versus them mentality. We want to cut through that on this podcast. We want to present the truth. We want to find the truth by having good discussion and honest debate. And I really think that is the best thing about new media, and it's the best thing about this new age we live in, that no matter what side of the political aisle you are on, I believe you could sit and you can listen to somebody talk, and you can use your critical thinking skills to determine if what they are saying is legitimate and useful, or if what they're saying is propaganda. And I think the main way to tell is if they're just parroting or repeating something that they heard somewhere else, or if they can actually, instead of straw man the other side, steel man the other side, meaning make the other side strong instead of weak, and actually understand the other side's points of view. So that's what we want to do on this program. If you like that idea, give us a like, share us with a friend, or go out to utahstories.com and consider becoming a member for $5 a month. There's all sorts of benefits to becoming a member, getting all the access behind our paywall, getting Utah Stories, Faces of Utah delivered every quarter to your home, and or Utah Stories magazine. This is our February issue. Our brand new issue is going to come out a week from today. But but it's basically how to have fun in Utah in February. All right, so let's dive in. So I want to get into questions if you have them. What do you think about Doge? I'm going to take pauses throughout the podcast today and answer and address people's questions and comments. But I want to first talk about like what is Doge and why I believe it's necessary. So my personal opinion is that Doge is absolutely necessary because we have a $38 trillion of debt. And if we just kind of ignore that debt, we just continue to spend at a $4 trillion deficit, what is going to happen is eventually, this wouldn't happen right away, but eventually the biggest line item of all of our budgetary spending would be the interest we pay on our debt. Not the Defense Department, not Social Security, not Medicaid, but the biggest line item, and this would happen in the next 4 years, would be the interest we pay on our national debt. That means before we even get to giving anybody checks for Social Security, for Medicaid, for defense, for anything, we would be paying an enormous amount of interest, something like $3 trillion in 5 years. So what then would be the end game to that? Many people in the United States would be absolutely burdened by the debt that the federal government is putting on their shoulders, and then they would basically say, you know what, I'm checking out. I'm going to leave this country. I'm going to go to some other country where I don't have this debt burden. And if you don't believe me that that would happen, take a look at the Weimar Republic after the Treaty of Versailles was signed and the debt burden that was shouldered onto the Germans during that time period. It was before World War II. It was when they had massive inflation because they couldn't service the debt anymore. Their currency was devalued to the point where you'd have to take a whole wheelbarrow load of cash to pay for groceries. People stockpiled stacks of money in their house just to pay for things like milk and eggs. And when your currency loses all its value, your whole not only your democracy falters, but all of your institutions go down with it. And you basically have to reset your currency, throw out the old currency, and say, okay, we're going to say $1,000 is now $1. And we're going to come up with a new dollar that's instead of green, maybe it's red. And we're going to say, okay, this is our new currency. We really can't do that here in the United States without facing international turmoil, because the main thing that keeps the dollars valuable is the fact that internationally people stockpile dollars, $100 bills all across the world. There are so many millions and millions of dollars all across the world that people stockpile as a reserve currency. And we are the petrodollar. We are the currency used for trade in oil all across the world. That is really what's propping up our currency. We lose that petrodollar status, which China and Russia are trying to take us away from that status. We will absolutely see a massive collapse in those stockpiles of currency where people will trade in their dollars for the local currencies and not believe that the dollars have value. And so I learned about this by learning about economics. So what is economics? When you used to say that word when I was a young person, economics, finance, math, I just was not into it. I was an artist. I was a filmmaker. I did not want to study this kind of stuff. But I finally got into it after actually studying history and math and realizing there's sort of a connecting point between history and math, in that you can look at history in a very analytical way by studying economics. And you can understand how and why things happened the way they did by understanding economics. And so the history of economics I started to find very fascinating because, for example, why did the Great Depression happen? It's a controversial topic. A lot of people don't understand what is it that caused the Great Depression, what caused the stock market crash of, I believe, 1932, and what made all the the entire economy worldwide go into this Great Depression. And it was at a time period after a massive boom. There was Wall Street corporations that were exceeding incredible values that everybody thought was just going to keep going up and up and up because of the amazing growth of the United States between the time period of after World War I. But here's a clip from a show I stumbled upon when I started my pursuit of economics. This is a documentary made in 1980 by Milton Friedman, who's a great economist. It's called Freedom to Choose, and I want to play this clip for you. While I'm playing the clip, come up with any questions you want after it. If you have any questions, I want to address those. So this is Free to Choose, made in 1980 with Milton Friedman.
Once, all this was a swamp, covered with forests. The Canarsie Indians who lived here traded the 22 square miles of soggy Manhattan Island to the Dutch for $24 worth of cloth and trinkets. The newcomers founded a city, New Amsterdam, at the edge of an empty continent. In the years that followed, it proved a magnet for millions of people from across the Atlantic, people who were driven by fear and poverty, who were attracted by the promise of freedom and plenty. They fanned out over the continent and built a new nation with their sweat, their enterprise, and their vision of a better future. For the first time in their lives, many were truly free to pursue their own objectives. That freedom released the human energies which created the United States. For the immigrants who were welcomed by this statue, America was truly a land of opportunity. They poured ashore in their best clothes, eager and expectant, carrying what little they owned. They were poor, but they all had a great deal of hope. Once they arrived, they found, as my parents did, not an easy life, but a very hard life. But for many, there were friends and relatives to help them get started, to help them make a home, get a job, settle down in the new country. There were many rewards for hard work, enterprise, and ability. Life was hard, but opportunity was real.
It's very worthwhile to go back and consider, why did so many people want to come to the United States, especially at the turn of the century? Why did so many people decide to come to the U.S. knowing that they would have a much harder life economically, and they would be making a huge sacrifice to come over here and not stay where they were? And this was the case for my own ancestors. My own ancestors came from Armenia and England, and they came for differing reasons. I know that my ancestors came from England, I believe, because they wanted the free land that was offered in the Great Basin Kingdom to help build the kingdom of Zion and the kingdom of God on earth with the Latter-day Saints. That's the side of my family that came from mostly England and Scandinavia. My Armenian ancestors came here with nothing at all to escape persecution, and they had really absolutely nothing. They knew they were going to be working their butts off. My great-grandfather was a ditch digger. He would just go dig ditches for people, and had a really hard life, died in his early 40s, had 7 kids, and they were dirt poor. Like literally their floors were dirt. And my grandpa had to go with his brother and snatch random bits of coal from the coal yard and around the trains to go heat their home. And he had crazy stories about how poor they were. But why would they come here? And it was because it was literally the land of opportunity. The government was small. There were no programs for social programs for the people who were impoverished at that time. I'm not saying that it's bad to have them, but at that time there were no programs for homeless people. It was just, you came, and if you would work your butt off, you were given a reward in that you could keep your money and you could buy things with your money and you could eventually buy property. And I think the promise to be able to buy property was probably the biggest draw for the people who came to the United States. And so essentially what you learned from that documentary and that segment of Freedom to Choose, the documentary I just showed, is that people vote with their feet. People decide what is the very best opportunity for them with wherever they move to go. And people come here in droves to the United States. Is it because of our welfare state, because of our social security systems, because of all of the alphabet soup of government agencies that have regulations? No, they come here for economic opportunity. They come here because they have the promise of starting a business where they could actually see their hard work end up in reward for their family. And for my great-grandfather, who dug ditches almost his whole life and worked in the smelter at Kennecott for a little period of time in really horrible conditions, all of his kids, every single one of them that lived, one of them died in childbirth, they all went on to higher education. They got degrees. They became professionals. They were able to start families and have a much better opportunity than they could have ever had back in Armenia, where they came from. And so it was building on this idea that you're going to create a better promise for the future for your kids. And so when it comes back, so I'm going to come back to Doge. I'm now weaving back all the way back around to Doge. When we look at the size of the bloated government right now, and we understand that every single American who lives right now, if we divide $38 trillion by 340 million Americans, everyone is saddled with about $200,000 in debt. That's federal government debt. And I mean, how long would it take most people to pay $200,000 off today? I would say decades upon decades upon decades. And it limits our freedom. That amount of debt and that amount of burden will absolutely destroy our country. And I began to sort of report on this and talk about this about 6 years ago, when I started to see inflation was going to happen. There was no question. When the COVID spending got really out of control, I could see we are spending our way into oblivion. We are going to have massive problems with inflation if we don't curtail this spending. And so I think Elon and Doge is doing what's absolutely necessary. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's sad to see that federal government employees, I just talked to some people in Ogden yesterday, they're getting laid off. They're going to have to find other jobs in the IRS building in Ogden, in the Bureau of Land Management, in the Forest Service. They're laying off a lot of people. But the alternative is that we completely have a financial collapse. And that's the way I see it. Obviously, like I said, I'm biased. I've studied what I study and I know what I know. But yeah, let's check out your comments, and I'd love to hear from you and read what you got to say. Tax the billionaires. I like that you brought up that comment, because it was back in the early 2000s when France had that exact same idea. Here they were in a big problem with the size of the government. They have in Europe very, very generous pensions. And those pension programs were set up when people were expected to live to be the age of 65. And they have a very old population in France. So they have way too few people paying into the system. And these old people who are at the end of their working careers, they want to keep receiving their pensions, of course. They don't want to see that their pensions are curtailed. So they said, tax the rich, tax the billionaires, get it all from the billionaires. It's not fair. They make them pay their fair share. And most people, of course, said, yes, that's exactly what we'll do. So they did. They imposed a 80% tax on people who were earning, I believe, over $1 million salary, or had I can't remember the details, but I think people who had a net worth of over $20 million. What happened to all the millionaires in France? They moved somewhere else. They just up and left. And then France's economy shrinked even more. And so they quickly realized, okay, that idea did not fly. And I think you would see exactly the same thing. The People who have a lot of money, have a lot of wealth, you want them in your country. They are the ones who spend a lot of money. We launched Faces of Utah based on the idea that we want to get our advertisers in front of the people who have the most disposable income in Utah. If all those people were to leave and say go to wonderful places like Thailand or Croatia, any place that's a tax haven, they're going to up and leave. They're going to vote with their feet, as I mentioned earlier. Hey, what else we got? Okay, repeal the Trump tax cut. How much did that contribute to the debt? Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that one because I understand Trump cut taxes for across the board for everyone, both for the middle class and the upper class. And but what they've found? They've done studies, and you can check this out and search it on your own. But you raise the tax rate above a certain level, and overall tax receipts actually go down. When you have lower taxes, the overall tax receipts actually go up. So you could say, yeah, let's raise taxes across the board. Let's just increase the amount of revenue the government should take in. And the problem is that doesn't result in more revenue. It actually results in less revenue. Why is that? Because the rich have incredible access to the very best CPAs in the world. I discovered this. They can find the very best loopholes. They can find the very best tax havens. They can store their money overseas. The rich know how to do whatever that is necessary to protect and preserve their wealth. The upper middle class and the not so rich, they don't know how to do that. So the Trump tax cuts, if we just removed them, the people who would be most impacted would be the upper middle class and the middle class. Let's see what else we got. What do you got? Oh, shoulda just taken the billionaires to the guillotine. Well, I mean, you can hate on the billionaires. I think you can think that they're the source of all evil. But you know what COVID did, and this was unfortunate. We were a recipient of a PPP grant and an EIDL loan, and we were extremely lucky to get it because we're very small. The thing that happened with that massive windfall in government checks was it all rose to the top. I mean, all the billionaires who were investing in big corporations like Amazon and Walmart and every major tech company, we know the FANG group of stocks, they all got much richer. They all got way richer. And that was the result. So a sales tax is a consumption tax. An income tax is a working tax. I actually love the idea of just having purely consumption taxes, because if the harder you work, the more you are punished in the eyes of the government. The harder you strive to build your wealth and increase the lifestyle you wish to live, the more you are punished by the government. Why can't you increase your lifestyle and be taxed just on the money you spend on what you want to buy? I mean, that seems like it makes more sense to me in terms of basic economic theory, which is tax anything you want less of and subsidize anything you want more of. If you want more people to work, right now I know there are 13 million working age men who are no longer in the workforce in the United States. 13 million people are sitting at home, not choosing to work at all. If you wanted to see more of those people work, why not give all those people a huge tax break and say, hey, come to the workforce. Your first couple years, we're not going to tax you at all if you just put your abilities to productive use. Go check out Free to Choose. Go check out this wonderful documentary I stumbled upon. Study economics. Learn more about how and why things happened in the past the way they did, how the Great Depression panned out. I know that's a big homework assignment, and you might not want to do it, but I spent about a decade studying economics and history, and I feel I feel like I got a lot from it. I feel like, as my grandpa said it, I paid my debt to humanity. We stand on the shoulders of giants in this world. We do so many things thanks to all the people who came before us. I think every day that my great-grandfather was a ditch digger, and he did so much sacrifice so that I enjoy such a good life. And I think everybody who enjoys a good life should understand that and understand where you came from by understanding the shoulders that you stand on